I want you to turn in your Bibles to 2 Samuel chapter 16. I want to talk about something extremely practical, something that you probably already faced. If you haven't faced it, you're going to face it. And if you haven't faced it already, or you will face it, and if you think you aren't, you probably are a part of it. I'm going to talk about how to handle hurting words. It's a fancy title for gossip. A few years ago, a college president had to have cataract surgery on both of his eyes. Fairly serious operation at that time. The prayer chain began to circulate word about this, and one old lady who couldn't hear very well began to spread the word that the new president at the Bible college had 2 Cadillacs, and she was no longer going to support that school at all with her hard-earned sacrificial money. Those things really do happen. I just got a call this week one night, some response from the phone-a-thon, and someone called me and said, "Well, you're the president. I want to ask you about it." And they began to unfold the most outlandish story you've ever heard in your life. If it hadn't been serious, I'd have laughed. If it hadn't been a significant person, I'd have laughed in their face. But it was a very significant person who said, "I got this from a reputable source." I felt like saying, gossip is never reputable. I don't care what your source is. But words are going to come. Trust me. How many have already felt their stinging blow from another classmate? You ever had anybody say something about you that hurt? Let me see your hands. Okay, more girls than guys, but maybe they're just more honest. 2 Samuel chapter 16, beginning in verse 5, is the story of King David. David is a man after God's own heart, a special king. His reign is just sort of set up as it's the standard bearer for all that comes after him. There was a special intimacy between God and David, but David had some problems, and a part of what's happening in this scenario is the consequence of David's previous sin. As you know, we pick up the story, Absalom's overthrown the kingdom. He's actually trying to kill his father and take his father's throne. David, rather than fight in the city, flees the city. He flees in a sense of with just real humility and brokenness. He goes out barefooted, throwing dust on his head. And as he's making his way out of the city, there's one of the descendants of Saul, a man by the name of Shimei. And he's watching David and all of his mighty men leave the city, and he sees the throng coming, and he focuses, and he finally picks out King David. And he moves alongside the caravan that's moving out. And he starts throwing stones at David and his men. And he starts cursing them. And this is the core of his curse. He says, "Go up, thou bloody man. You slew Saul and his household, and now God has brought down on your head the innocent blood of Saul, in giving Absalom, your son, the throne." That's the core of the accusation. There couldn't have been, of all the accusations, he could have accused him possibly of being a man who committed adultery. He could have accused him of slaying the innocent blood of Joab. But of all the things in the world that David was not guilty of, he was not guilty of the blood of Saul. David had spent a considerable portion of his life fleeing Saul and hiding from Saul, even when it seems like Providence had placed Saul right in David's hands to slay him. You remember the story of the cave. On more than one occasion, David could have slain Saul, but he said, "I will not touch the Lord's anointed." And even when Saul was overthrown and the Amalekite came and told David the news about Saul's death, he had fallen on his sword and he had not died. And you remember that story, and the Amalekite said, I finished the job, thinking he's going to get a reward from David, and David had the man killed. He felt so strongly about no one should touch God's anointed. So of all the humiliation, of all the things that could have been said about David, this was the most untrue, unjust, and unfair that could be said. Now, when criticism comes, when it comes to you, trust me, it will generally be the most unjust, unfair, untrue, something anybody could say about you. So, what do? Well, fortunately, God gave us these pictures and patterns in the Old Testament. One thing He helps us to see is why people criticize. Now, we could go in to just say it's a sinful heart, they're carnal, they're evil on the inside, they got all kinds of issues. But when you look at this passage of Scripture and you notice, why in the world did Shimei launch this criticism at David? Well, the key to this is Shimei was of the house of Saul. He was a descendant of Saul, and when Saul's kingdom ended, it brought down the demise of all the influence and power and financial advantage that Saul's relatives have had for years. Shimei's little world came to a sudden collapse, and Shimei was carrying an old family grudge. Here's the man that replaced Saul. Here's the man who stood in the way of prosperity for me and my household. Here's the man who's brought all of this tragedy and calamity and financial hardship to pass in my life. And so Shimei suddenly saw his chance. I can launch curses. I can vent my spleen of all of this anger because David's humiliated. He's fleeing for his life. They're not going to bother me. And so a number of things came to pass. Timing, circumstance, the right situation, and all of this pent-up anger comes flooding out of Shimei to make this accusation. But what is more significant in this passage is David's response. And this is something, here's where you and I get on board to learn how in the world do we respond to people who criticize us. What did David say to Shimei? Give me a little feedback this morning. Talk to me. What did he say? Got any idea? That's right, Marika. He said nothing. He did not speak to Shimei. Though he did turn to his inner circle of warriors and bodyguards who said, let me go over and take this dead dog's head right off his body. I'll put an end to this. And he restrained them. He said, don't touch the man. Who knows? Maybe God has bid him to curse me. What do we do when people lash out against us and say things that are painful and hurting? Well, let me give you at least 6 things you can do very quickly. Number 1, develop a tough hide. One thing you're going to find out about in life and in ministry, there's just nothing fair about it. There is no justice in this world. It's just unfair. Things are going to be said about us. Things are going to be said about you. Things are going to be said about the faculty. Things are going to be said about the school. Things are going to be said about your church. Things are going to be said about whatever you associate with. And more closely to home, things may be said about your wife. Things may be said about your children. I've had plenty of little darts fly in my direction. I live in the middle of a 40-acre field. There's not a tree one that I can hide behind. And they shoot, they fire. Quite frankly, it's annoying, but it's not problematic. I've learned over the years to develop a tough hide. But when somebody moves beyond me and they touch the school, I'm a little more sensitive to that. I get up in my defensive posture. And then if they touch the faculty or a student or staff, I'm really getting defensive. But if you really want to see me like a mother bear robbed of her cubs, touch my family. And I really get out of sorts, because that's the closest thing in the world to me. And it's going to happen to you. And it will not be fair. But you better start right now developing a very tough hide. Ecclesiastes chapter 7, 21 through 22 has been extremely valuable to me. Years ago, many years ago, probably 12 or 13 years ago, not too long after I was here, one of the VPs, who is not here, if he was here, he'd let me tell it, but he's not here. I passed his office one day. I was out getting some coffee at the coffee fountain, and I walked back by. I wasn't listening. I wasn't snooping. I don't do that stuff. I'm too busy to do that kind of stuff. But he was talking real loud. And this old building, some of these rooms, almost just like a megaphone, they just push the noise right out. And when I walked by, he was talking about me. And I just didn't stop. It was a shock. I heard him say my name, and then I heard him say something very unflattering about me. I just kept going. I said to myself, when he gets off that telephone, I'm calling him over to my office. I'll teach him a lesson about talking about the president. I sat down to my desk, started rubbing my wounds, and God said, matter of fact, God spoke, Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 21 in my ears. I'd marked this and memorized this verse the summer before I came to GBS. It's still marked in this Bible. This is what it said. Take no heed unto all the words that are spoken, lest thou hear thy servant cursing you. For ofttimes also thine own heart knoweth that thou hast likewise cursed others. The point of that verse is, don't take everything to heart that you hear said. You've said things about others, you didn't really mean it, like it sounded, like it came out, so just throttle back on your jets and cool your engines. Don't take it to heart. That's been one of the most valuable pieces of advice I've ever been given. Develop a tough hide. Don't take everything to heart. I was just speaking at a men's retreat this weekend, had a fantastic time with those men, of almost 200 men. And early one morning, I was headed to the shower room. I turned the corner, and there were two of the guys in the retreat, and they were talking. And yeah, that too. And they were having a treat. And I heard this word, there's two words. When I turned the corner, I heard the words, Mike Avery. And they weren't calling out to me, they were talking about me. But I didn't hear a thing else. I walked on up, they saw me coming, they continued chatting, and I went on about my business. You know what I could have done? I could have said, I think they're talking about me. I wonder what they said. Guess what I did? Nothing. Not a thing in the world. I could care less. There's plenty about me that if they wanted to criticize, they could criticize. But more than likely, they were giving some compliment about the outstanding material that I was giving them in that retreat. And they were just rejoicing over that. Right? Right. Move on. Number 2, keep things in perspective. David realized that Shimei's cursing was nothing in comparison to Absalom's treason. The unfair criticism from a sour old man can look fairly small in the light of some serious issues in life. Put it in perspective. Weigh it out in comparison to some real big issues. Number 3, learn to hold your tongue. Not every criticism deserves an immediate answer. One man who had just joined the local church hadn't been a member very long until he was confronted by one of the old tongue waggers in the church who'd been around a long time, who made it her business to straighten everybody out. Here's what she said to him. She said, "I saw your car parked in front of the bar all afternoon last week. And everybody knows anybody who leaves a vehicle that long in front of the bar has to be an alcoholic. So your sin's going to catch up with you. You must be an alcoholic." He wasn't even in the bar. He just happened to park his vehicle there for a while. You know what he said to her? Nothing. He just stared at her and walked out. Guess what he did? About the time sun was setting, he parked his truck in front of her house and left it there all night. You better learn to hold your tongue. When I have tried to defend myself, when I have tried to run this down and that down and go on a witch hunt to find out who said this and how they said that and what'd you say this for, guess what? It's the nastiest thing you ever want to get into. Forget it. If somebody says something about you that's true, humble yourself before God, acknowledge it, straighten it out. If it's not true, forget it. Forget it and move on. Trying to fix it can cause you more problems than you're interested in. Number 4, try to understand where the person is coming from. I've had people who've been critical of the school. I'm sensitive about GBS. Sometimes my family says, "Daddy, you act like GBS is a human being. You're too sensitive sometimes." You'll understand someday. When God leads you into that church, when I was pastoring, I didn't want anybody talking about our church. I didn't want anybody talking about my church people. I don't want anybody talking about this school. I don't want anybody talking about the faculty. I don't want anybody talking about the students. You become a little personal. It gets personal sometimes. But occasionally, I hear comments made from a student that went to another sister school or something a sister school's PR person has said. It irritates the life out of you. But I've tried to stand back and say, I need to understand where they're coming from, how they feel, what they're struggling with, what they're going through. We had an episode happen a number of years ago, and when Brenda Herring was still with me, happened in my office. And Brenda just shook her head. She said, I can't understand why anybody would behave that way. It didn't trouble me that bad. I said, Brenda, I'll tell you why. And the person involved wasn't a student, it was an outside person. I said, they're poor. I said, what you're going to find out, Brenda, is very, very poor people struggling with financial issues behave differently. It's not right, it's not justifiable, but they do. And you better understand that, and you better cut them a little bit of slack. Try to understand where they're coming from. Number 5, see God's hand behind it. This may be the most difficult. One of the most painful episodes I ever had in my life from another person who literally attacked me from every angle. My mind, my soul, my body, my family, my life, my work. They hit me in every direction you could be hit. The most vicious attack that you could imagine. It took me a while, but I see God's hand behind it. When I tell that story now, I can say with all honesty, God in His marvelous grace brought that person into my office to do what they did for a reason. It was unfair, unjust, untrue. That's beside the point. Don't get distracted with the incident. There was a reason, and God used it in my life. Number 6, exercise forgiveness and just move on. Don't get hung up on that horseshoe. Some people throw a horseshoe around a stake and they can just never get it off. They live there. They're tied to it. Anytime you want to talk to them for a few minutes, guess what's going to come up? Here it comes. Their little universe begins to orbit around some hurt, and they never shake it off. Some injustice. Somebody's done me wrong. Forget it, forgive them, and move on. What can we all do to help with this gossip stuff? How do you handle hurting words? People who want to talk and criticize and say what can we all do? Well, we can stop gossip in its tracks. I think there's a definition for gossip up on the screen right now. To gossip means to betray a confidence or to discuss unfavorable personal facts about another person with someone who's not a part of the problem or the solution. It's a fairly good definition for gossip. So how do we stop that? Well, number 1, don't give it any soil to grow in. Indiana University, sociologists there did research on gossip, 3 years of research on gossip. You know what he found out? He found out that in gossip is not the person who says it. He calls it the person who seconds the gossip. If someone walks up and says, "Hey, did you know so-and-so's just a real snob?" It begins. But the key to that becoming gossip is the person who's listening saying, yeah, I think you're right. And then it's off and running. Gossip will stop dead in its tracks if that second person or the first person to hear it says nothing or says, "No, that's gossip. You need to stop that." It'll stop it dead right in its tracks. Don't give gossip any soil to grow in. Put an end to it. Number 2, tell the person who says it, "I'm going to check that out. I'm going to call them, see if that's true." Brother, that'll get things called to a halt real fast. If you really want to push that button a little bit, ask them to write it out on a piece of paper and sign their name. And say, "I just want to get all of this, please, I want this exactly verbatim for what you just said. Then I'm going to call this person, see if they said it." And the third thing is, confront people who are gossips. I know that's the most difficult in the world to do, is to confront anybody. And quite frankly, a huge weakness institutionally, right here, is that down the chain, a lot of people don't like to confront anybody. Who wants to look like the bad guy? But you know what? When you are in a position of responsibility, if you refuse to confront, then it pushes it up the chain. And it keeps going up the chain. So, do you know where it gets? It finally gets to the point there's only one place for it. You guess where it stops? Yeah, that's right. That's right, Thomas. And then the guy at the top becomes the big bad guy because nobody else has the guts or the fortitude or the courage or the conviction to confront. And it stops in his office. You say, "Brother Avery, I'm just a student." Just a student? Just a student? You're a man of God. You're a woman of God. You're a citizen of this community. You're a responsible person who I hope has a little bit of a backbone, who can stand on your own 2 feet and say, whoa, I don't believe that. I don't think that's true. I don't believe you put the right spin on that. Well, I don't want anybody not to like me. There's a lot of people who don't like you already. One more won't hurt. Get over it. Learn to put some steel. We've got a warped notion about a lot of things that somebody picked up on the streets of the public school somewhere. Oh, I couldn't do that. I'd be snitching on people. I couldn't do that. I'm not interested in going out tattling on people. I'm not interested in somebody being a Mr. Goody Two-Shoes that straights everybody out like the little gossip I talked about before. I'm interested in people standing up on their own 2 feet and acting like a decent human being and saying, I don't believe that. I don't buy that. I'm not going to listen to that. I'm not going to let that go on this campus. And that's good from the bottom to the top. Somebody comes in and tells me a story about you, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to find out. That's why it happens so rarely. I had a man one time talking about some of our faculty, and he wouldn't shut up. So I just called him up. I called him up, and you know what? He wasn't used to anybody calling him up. I called him up and I said, this is what I hear you're saying. This, this, and this. Did you? Did you say this? And it's always the same thing. Well, not exactly like that. Well, what was the difference? The and the and or the other stuff? And well, you know, and I was very kind. I just called him up very kindly. I said, look, I want you to come speak in chapel. After chapel, we're going to have lunch together. And the person you've been talking about, we're going to sit them right across the table from you. And you're going to say this stuff to them, and they're going to let you talk back. We did. He did. And none of the stuff he said was true. And guess what? Didn't slow him down a bit. But when I confronted him, he circulated the word. The president called him up and just chewed him out. Let me tell you something. Humanity has an infinite capacity to defend, to justify whatever they want to do. That's called the sinful carnal heart. One thing I've tried to learn a long time ago is to take the fisticuffs down. If it's about me, say it. In one occasion when someone was giving me considerable grief, wasn't true. You know what I told him? I said, if that's true, then will you pray for me and help me and make me a better person? They hardly knew what to do with that. They hadn't thought about praying or mentoring or helping. How do we handle hurting words? There will not be anything at all in your ministry that will give you more grief than what I'm talking about right now. There may not even be a close second. You will have much more severe hurts, but nothing that will give you more grief and agitate you more than this. And if you are one of those people with a loose mouth, I pray God will smite you hip and thigh with lockjaw. Or better yet, he'll turn some gossip loose on you and give you a real good dose of what it feels like. And that's a good remedy to help you shut up yourself. How do we handle hurting words? Let's look to David. It's a great, great example. Let's stand.
We're glad you joined us. God's Bible School and College prepares students for lives of ministry wherever God calls them. This content is possible because of the generous support of friends like you. To support GBSC, visit giving.gbs.edu. Thank you.